At the Christmas party, my t-shirt said, "Still unemployed," then casually mentioned my $1 million business. I sat in my car outside my parents' house, staring at the festive lights that somehow looked both welcoming and judgmental. The clock read 5:47 p.m. I was deliberately late. Enough to skip the initial small talk, but not so late that Mom would call worried. My phone buzzed. "Jessica, my sister. Where are you?" Mom's asking. I ignored it and instead studied my reflection in the rearview mirror. The bags under my eyes told the story of late nights I couldn't share with them. But it was my shirt that gave me a small thrill of defiance, a plain white tee with bold black letters. Still unemployed. I'd ordered it 3 days ago from a small shop specializing in sarcastic apparel. The irony wasn't lost on me, using my business credit card to buy a shirt declaring my jobless status. But after 5 years of the same questions, the same pitying looks, the same unsolicited career advice, I was done defending myself. "Might as well beat them to the punch," I muttered, adjusting the shirt. Mom texted next. "Sweetie, are you coming? Uncle Phil is asking for you." Of course he was. Uncle Phil with his car dealership empire and his annual, "When are you getting a real job?" questioning. The same Uncle Phil who'd offered me an entry-level sales position every Christmas since graduation, a position my cousin Tyler had described as soul-crushing slavery with commission. I pulled into the driveway, parking my 7-year-old Corolla behind a row of luxury vehicles that showcased the family's success. It looked desperately out of place. So did I. Music and laughter spilled out as I approached the door. I could identify each laugh. Jessica's controlled chuckle, never too loud, just like her perfectly managed attorney life, and Karen's high-pitched giggle that always preceded some backhanded compliment, and Dad's deep belly laugh reserved for people he actually respected. I hesitated on the porch. Through the decorative glass, I could see my family, the people who'd shaped me, supported me, and recently made me feel like the biggest disappointment to ever carry the Henderson name. The door swung open. Mom stood there in her red snowflake sweater, wine in hand, relief on her face. "There you are." She pulled me into a cinnamon and Chanel-scented hug. We were starting to worry. "Traffic," I lied, returning her hug with one arm while clutching a bottle of wine with the other. One of our newest corporate gifts that had cost $95 but would be received as a thoughtful $15 gesture. Her eyes dropped to my shirt. I watched her expression shift from welcome to confusion to forced amusement. "Oh, that's certainly making a statement, isn't it? Just thought I'd save everyone the trouble of asking," I replied with a tight smile. "Well, at least you have a sense of humor about it." I followed her into the living room, where the Henderson Christmas was in full swing. Jessica and her husband stood by the fireplace in coordinating outfits that screamed successful professionals. My cousin Mark showed something on his phone, probably photos from his latest medical mission trip. Conversation halted as I entered. 20 pairs of eyes turned toward me, registered my presence, then inevitably dropped to my shirt. The reactions ranged from uncomfortable smiles to poorly concealed pity to, in Uncle Phil's case, outright amusement. Well, Uncle Phil boomed, crossing the room with a whiskey tumbler. "Look who's being honest this year." He pointed at my shirt, laughing loudly enough to draw everyone's attention. "Figured I'd save you the trouble of asking," I replied, maintaining eye contact. "That's what I've always liked about you, kiddo," he said, throwing an arm around my shoulders. "You may not have direction, but you've got guts." Laughter rippled through the room. I laughed too, but it was the hollow kind I'd perfected over years of these gatherings. "Dinner's almost ready," Mom announced, clearly trying to move past the moment. "Why don't you get yourself a drink?" I headed for the bar cart, but Jessica intercepted me. "Really?" she hissed, gesturing at my shirt. "Was that necessary? Mom and Dad were already stressed about you being late." "Nice to see you too, Jess," I replied, reaching past her for the wine opener. "How's the firm? Still on partner track? Don't change the subject. You know how these parties stress Mom out and you show up like this." She waved at my appearance. I poured myself a generous glass of red. Like what? Someone who's accepted their role in this family? The perpetual disappointment? The cautionary tale you probably use with your associates. Jessica's perfectly maintained expression cracked slightly. That's not fair. Isn't it? When was the last time you asked what I was actually doing with my life instead of when I was going to get a real job? Before she could answer, Aunt Karen swooped in with her twin daughters trailing behind like designer-clad shadows. "There's my favorite nephew," she exclaimed, air-kissing both my cheeks. Her eyes dropped to my shirt, and she let out a practiced laugh. "Oh my, aren't you funny? At least you're embracing it." She lowered her voice. "Though between us, have you considered those jobs I sent? Federal benefits are nothing to sneeze at." "I'm good, thanks," I replied, taking a large sip. "Well, the offer stands. Michelle's boyfriend's brother works at the State Department. Very entry-level friendly." Michelle nodded enthusiastically. "He could totally put in a word. You just need a foot in the door." I felt my cheeks heat up, not from embarrassment, but from restraint. If they only knew that last week, I'd turned down an acquisition offer with more zeros than Uncle Phil's dealership would make in a decade. "Dinner's ready." Mom called, saving me from responding. As we moved toward the dining table, a Henderson heirloom that had witnessed decades of family drama, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. The guy staring back looked like he was playing a part in a bizarre holiday play. The unemployed family failure, reporting for duty. Little did they know, tonight would be the last performance of that role. I took another sip of wine and followed them. The weight of their assumptions heavy on my shoulders, but not nearly as heavy as the secret I was finally ready to reveal. Dad carved the turkey with surgical precision, his annual performance as family patriarch in full swing. "So, Mark," he said to my cousin, "tell us about that new cardiac procedure you pioneered." Mark launched into a detailed explanation of some revolutionary technique he developed. Everyone leaned in, captivated. Jessica's husband asked intelligent questions. Uncle Phil nodded proudly. This was the Henderson way: success, ambition, prestige. I sipped my wine and remembered a different Christmas dinner 3 years ago. That night, I'd left early, unable to bear another minute of questioning about my career trajectory. I'd driven to my apartment, a dingy studio with peeling paint and unreliable heat, and sat on my mattress on the floor, staring at my bank account balance, $147.28. It was my rock bottom. 3 jobs in 2 years, all ending badly. An advertising position where my boss stole my ideas. A marketing coordinator role that was glorified coffee fetching. A retail management job with soul-crushing hours. That night, I'd open my laptop, ready to apply for yet another corporate job I'd hate. Instead, I found myself scrolling through my photo album, stopping on images of handmade candles and wall hangings I'd created to manage my stress. The pieces weren't anything special, just experiments with different scents, colors, and designs. But creating them had been the only time I'd felt peaceful in months. On a whim, I'd posted a few photos on Instagram. Just some things I make to stay sane. Not bad for an unemployed drifter, right? I woke up to 17 comments and messages asking if they were for sale. Present-day Uncle Phil's voice cut through my memory. "Hasn't figured out what to do with his life yet," he was saying to Jessica's husband. "But everyone blooms at their own pace, I suppose." I smiled tightly, remembering what happened after that rock-bottom night. I'd started selling on Etsy with 0 expectations. Just 5 products, 3 candle varieties, and 2 wall hangings. My first customer was a college friend who bought out of pity. The second was a stranger from Seattle. By the end of the first month, I'd made $78. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The second month brought $212. The third, for $185. I stayed up nights watching tutorials on product photography, SEO, marketing psychology, anything I could find for free. While my family thought I was finding myself, I was building something one step at a time. "More potatoes?" Mom asked, yanking me back to the present dinner table. "Please," I nodded, passing my plate. Jessica was now holding court, describing a complex case she'd just won. Everyone hung on her words. I remembered calling her during that time, desperate for encouragement. "Maybe if you'd stick with something, anything, you wouldn't be struggling," she'd said dismissively. I have to go. Court in the morning. She never knew that after that call, I'd pulled an all-nighter researching e-commerce platforms. By month 6, I'd outgrown Etsy and launched my own Shopify store, designing the website myself to save money. I named it Wandernest Living, for souls who find home wherever they wander. The tagline had come to me at 3 a.m., and it felt right, a gentle rebellion against my family's definition of success, staying put, climbing ladders, following traditional paths. How's the job search going? Aunt Karen asked now, her voice dripping with performative concern. Any promising leads? I'm exploring options, I replied vaguely. What she didn't know, by month 8, I'd expanded from candles to home decor, throw pillows, ceramic vases, wall art. I found manufacturers who could scale my designs while maintaining quality, built an email list, created a content calendar. While they assumed I slept till noon, I was negotiating with suppliers in 3 countries and managing virtual assistants who handled customer service. My first big break came when a lifestyle influencer with 500,000 followers featured my autumn collection in her stories. The site crashed from traffic. We sold out in 3 hours. By the end of year 1, I'd hit 6 figures in revenue. Year 2 brought wholesale partnerships with boutiques, a feature in Domino magazine, an invitation to a major home goods trade show. Have you considered going back to school? Michelle suggested, her voice honey-sweet but eyes judgment-hard. It's never too late for a master's degree. I smiled politely. If only she knew that last year, I declined an offer to speak at her alma mater's business school, the same school that had rejected my application years ago. What the Hendersons never saw, the nights I cried from stress, the suppliers who disappeared with my deposits, the cash flow nightmares, the time I worked through pneumonia because I couldn't afford to take a day off, but also the thrill of seeing my products in a stranger's social media post, the first time I hired an employee, the moment Target reached out about carrying our holiday collection. 3 months ago, Wandernest had crossed $1.2 million in monthly sales. Last month, we'd expanded to Canada and the UK. Last week, I'd turned down an acquisition offer from a major home goods conglomerate that would have made me an instant multimillionaire. Not because it wasn't enough money, but because I wasn't done building yet. Earth to Space Cadet, Uncle Phil laughed, snapping his fingers in front of my face. I asked if he reconsidered my offer at the dealership. Entry level, but it's something. I smiled, took another bite of turkey, and said nothing. For 3 years, I'd kept my success hidden from them. Not out of shame, but because I was building something that was mine alone, untouched by their opinions or expectations. But tonight, that was about to change. Dinner ended with Dad's signature eggnog cheesecake. As dessert plates were cleared, the family migrated to the living room for the annual Henderson gift exchange, an elaborate affair where everyone tried to outdo each other with increasingly expensive presents. I excused myself to the bathroom, needing a moment of peace. Locking the door, I checked my phone to find 14 messages from my operations director. Our Australian launch had hit a snag with customs. 3 quick texts resolved the issue, a perk of building systems that could run without my constant attention. I splashed cold water on my face and stared at my reflection. For years, I'd played the role they expected, the underachieving cousin, the disappointing child, the cautionary tale. But tonight, something had shifted. I was tired of hiding my success, of shrinking myself to fit their narrow definition of achievement. When I returned to the living room, I found Mom arranging everyone for the annual family photo. There you are. Come stand between Jessica and Mark. I took my place, acutely aware of my still unemployed shirt contrasting with their polished outfits. The flash went off 3 times. Perfect, Mom declared. Now, let's do the siblings photo. As Jessica and I posed, she whispered, "Could you at least have worn something nicer? These photos are going on Mom's Facebook." What and disappoint my fans? I replied with mock innocence. Before she could respond, Aunt Karen swooped in, linking her arm through mine and steering me toward the sofa, where her daughters sat scrolling through their phones. Girls, put those away, she scolded Michelle and Melanie before turning her attention to me. Now, I've been meaning to have a little chat with you. The twins looked up, sensing entertainment. I recognized the ambush formation. I'd been cornered by the Karen triumvirate many times before. How old are you now, dear? Aunt Karen asked, though she knew exactly how old I was. 32, I replied. 32, she repeated, as if announcing a terminal diagnosis. You know, by your age, your father had already made regional manager and had 2 children. Different times, I said mildly. The job market is challenging now, Michelle offered in what she clearly thought was a generous defense. Though Mark managed to become chief of cardiology by 34. Mark's brilliant, I agreed. So are you, Melanie said with practiced sincerity. That's why it's so frustrating to see your potential wasted. Remember when you won that scholarship? Everyone thought you'd do something amazing. The scholarship, a creative writing award from high school 15 years ago. It had become family mythology, proof that I once had promise before inexplicably throwing it all away. Still my proudest achievement, I said, raising my glass in mock toast. Aunt Karen patted my knee. Have you considered therapy? Depression can manifest as lack of motivation. We know the best psychiatrist in Boston. He helped Michelle's roommate tremendously. I'm not depressed, Aunt Karen. Of course you wouldn't think so, dear. That's how depression works. I took a long sip of wine. I appreciate the concern, but I'm actually doing fine. Fine. Uncle Phil boomed, joining our circle uninvited. Fine is for mediocre people. Hendersons aren't fine. They're exceptional. Some of us are, I agreed, unable to resist the double meaning. Your poor parents, Aunt Karen sighed dramatically. They worry so much. They shouldn't. They can't help it. What parent wouldn't worry about a child your age with no career, no savings, no path forward? Did you know your father offered to pay for coding boot camp last year? You didn't even respond to the email. I hadn't responded because I'd been in Japan, meeting with potential distribution partners. The email had gotten buried during 18-hour workdays and a 12-hour time difference. Must have missed it, I said. This attitude, Uncle Phil wagged his finger at my shirt. It's not helping you. Self-deprecation is only funny when it's not true. You need to take life more seriously. The irony was almost too much. I'd spent the past 3 years taking nothing but my business seriously. Missed birthdays, sacrificed relationships, worked through pneumonia, mono, and a minor car accident. I'd reinvested every penny of profit, lived on ramen to afford my first warehouse lease, and hadn't taken a vacation in 1,095 days. Have you tried LinkedIn? Melanie suggested, as if introducing me to a revolutionary new concept. My friend got 3 interviews just by updating her profile. Ever think of working for Jessica's firm? Michelle added. I'm sure she could use someone to handle filing or reception. I imagine myself at Jessica's desk, answering her phones, after turning down venture capital funding last month. The thought almost made me laugh out loud. Ever think, I said carefully, measuring each word, that maybe I'm doing exactly what I want to be doing? Aunt Karen's expression softened into something worse than judgment. Pity. Oh, honey, it's good to accept your circumstances, but don't let pride keep you from accepting help. I'm not. Your generation has such unrealistic expectations, Uncle Phil interrupted. You all want to be millionaires overnight. Real success takes decades of grinding. There are no shortcuts. I thought about my shipping facility, 20,000 square feet, 37 employees, 3 shifts running 24/7 during holiday season. No shortcuts indeed. Maybe you're right, I said, suddenly weary of the conversation. We just want what's best for you, Aunt Karen insisted, squeezing my arm. We're family. We care. And there it was, the fundamental disconnect. They did care, in their narrow, prescribed way. They wanted me to fit their definition of success, to follow their approved paths. Any deviation wasn't creativity or entrepreneurship, it was failure. For the first time, I felt something unexpected, not anger or resentment, but a profound sadness for them. How limiting their view of success must be. How many possibilities they'd never consider. I stood up. I need another drink. As I walked away, I heard Aunt Karen whisper to her daughters, "Such a shame. All that potential wasted." Little did she know, tonight would change everything. I retreated to the far corner of the living room, refilling my glass with the expensive Cabernet I'd brought. 2 more hours, then I could politely excuse myself. The thought kept me going as I observed the Henderson Christmas in full swing. Jessica's husband David was deep in conversation with Dad about investment strategies. Mark was showing Mom photos of his humanitarian trip to Guatemala. Across the room, Aunt Karen's husband Tom argued with Uncle Phil. The usual Christmas choreography. "Hey, stranger." I turned to find my cousin Tyler, Uncle Phil's son, and the only Henderson who'd ever understood me. He'd escaped the car dealership empire by moving to Portland, where he now ran a moderately successful food truck. "Saw your shirt," he said, clinking his glass against mine. "Bold move. Dad's been talking about it all night." "Figured I'd embrace the role," I replied. Tyler glanced around before lowering his voice. "How's the business actually doing?" "Still killing it." He was the only family member who knew about Wandernest. Not because I'd told him, but because he'd randomly walked into a boutique in Portland that carried my products and recognized my design aesthetic from the sketches I'd shared with him years ago. "Better than ever," I admitted. "We're expanding to Australia next month." Tyler whistled low. "And these people still think you're unemployed? That's some serious Batman/Bruce Wayne energy." I laughed. "Tonight's the night I'm finally telling them." "For real? What changed your mind?" I considered the question. "I'm tired of pretending. Plus, I think Mom and Dad deserve to know before we announce the Target partnership next week. It'll be hard to hide once we're in stores nationwide." "Target? Holy shit," Tyler whispered. "Uncle Phil is going to have a stroke." "That's not my goal," I said, though the thought had its appeal. Speaking of Dad, Tyler nodded toward the center of the room, where Uncle Phil was now gathering everyone for the annual Henderson Christmas toast. This, too, was tradition. Uncle Phil making a long-winded speech about family accomplishments, subtly competing with my father for paternal dominance. "Attention, everyone," Uncle Phil's voice boomed. "Bring those glasses over here." We joined the circle forming around him. I strategically positioned myself between Tyler and my mother, away from Aunt Karen's reach. Another year of Henderson excellence. Uncle Phil raised his glass. Mark saving lives, Jessica winning cases, Michelle getting that promotion. He continued his inventory of family achievements, each one met with appropriate murmurs of approval. My name, as usual, was conspicuously absent. "And we're especially proud," he concluded with a pointed look in my direction, "of those still finding their way." Persistence is a Henderson trait, too. Polite laughter rippled through the circle. I smiled and raised my glass with everyone else. Let them have this last laugh. Everything was about to change. As the toast ended, the group splintered into smaller conversations. I noticed Jessica scrolling through her phone, then showing something to Michelle and Melanie. "Oh my God, have you seen these?" Jessica's voice carried across the room. "The new Wandernest holiday collection just dropped. Those ceramic houses that light up." My pulse quickened. This was not how I'd planned to bring it up, but the universe apparently had other ideas. Michelle took Jessica's phone, zooming in on the image. "I've been on their wait list for weeks. They sell out in minutes." "The way they package everything is just gorgeous," Melanie added. "I ordered a candle last month, and the unboxing experience was better than any luxury brand I've tried." I caught Tyler's eye across the room. He raised an eyebrow, silently asking if I was going to take the opening. I gave him a subtle nod. "My assistant got me their weekend tote for my birthday," Jessica continued. "The quality is incredible. Whoever runs that company is a genius at branding." "They're opening in Target next week," Michelle said, scrolling through Instagram. "I read it in their newsletter." "That's amazing for a company that started on Etsy just a few years ago," Melanie added. "I heard the founder is super young, like our age." The conversation continued, growing louder as more family members joined in. Mom looked over with interest. Uncle Phil was pretending not to listen while clearly straining to hear. I have their autumn candle collection, Aunt Karen admitted. The scents are so sophisticated, not like those cheap mall candles. I took a deep breath, stepped forward, and said in a conversational tone, "Actually, the winter collection launches tomorrow, not today." The Instagram post was scheduled early by mistake. 7 heads turned toward me in confusion. "How would you know that?" Jessica asked, her brow furrowed. I shrugged, taking a casual sip of wine. "Because I'm the founder. I started Wandernest." The silence that followed was absolute. Not the dramatic, sudden quiet of movies, but a rippling cessation of sound as each person processed what I'd said. Expressions shifted from confusion to disbelief to shock. Jessica recovered first. "What do you mean you started it?" "I mean I founded the company. Built it from scratch. I own it." I gestured to the phone in her hand. "That's my business." Wandernest, Michelle repeated slowly. "The Wandernest that's in Nordstrom? That has 2 million Instagram followers." 3 million as of last week, I corrected. "But yes, that Wandernest." Uncle Phil laughed, a sharp, disbelieving sound. "Very funny. Good joke." "It's not a joke, Uncle Phil." Mom stepped forward, her eyes searching my face. "Honey, what are you saying?" I met her gaze steadily. "I'm saying that for the past 3 years, while everyone thought I was unemployed, I've been building a multi-million-dollar business." And just like that, the truth was out. For 3 long seconds, nobody spoke. I took another sip of wine, oddly calm in the eye of the storm I'd just created. "That's impossible," Jessica finally said. "Wandernest is a major brand. It's..." She trailed off, staring at me as if seeing me for the first time. "Show us proof," Uncle Phil demanded, his voice lacking its usual authority. "Anyone can claim anything these days." I pulled out my phone, opened the company Instagram account, and switched to the admin view that showed all the analytics. Then I passed it to Mom, whose hands trembled slightly as she took it. "Oh my God," she whispered, scrolling through the back end of a business account with millions of followers. "This is really yours?" Dad stepped forward, looking over her shoulder. "How long have you been doing this?" 3 years, I replied. "Started it after I quit the advertising job." The job they'd all criticized me for leaving. The job that had nearly broken me. 3 years, Mom repeated, looking stricken. "And you never told us?" There was hurt in her voice that made my chest tighten. This was the part one hadn't fully anticipated. Not the shock or disbelief, but the pain of being excluded from such a significant part of my life. "I wanted to prove it was sustainable first," I explained, which was partly true. And then it just became easier not to explain. Jessica took the phone from Mom, scrutinizing the screen. "These numbers can't be right. You're saying Wandernest did over 1 million in sales last month." 1.2 million, I corrected. "December is our strongest month." Uncle Phil had gone uncharacteristically quiet, his expression unreadable. "The throw pillows in my living room," Melanie said slowly. "The ones you complimented at my housewarming, those are your products?" I nodded. The blue geometric pattern was inspired by that tile work we saw in Portugal when we were kids. "Remember that family trip?" Aunt Karen sank onto the sofa, looking dazed. "I recommended your candles to the entire country club." "I appreciate the support," I said, unable to resist a small smile. "But the shirt," Michelle pointed at my chest, where, still unemployed, stood in stark contrast to everything they now knew. "Why would you wear that if you have?" "Because technically, I don't have a job," I replied. "I have a company." Tyler snorted into his drink. A few others looked unamused. "This isn't funny," Jessica said sharply. "You've let us worry about you for years while you were what? Secretly successful? Was this some kind of test?" The accusation stung, even though I'd anticipated some version of it. "It wasn't about you," I said quietly. "It was about me needing to build something on my own terms, without everyone's input or expectations." "What's that supposed to mean?" Uncle Phil had found his voice again. "It means every time I've tried something different, this family has treated it like a phase to outgrow or a mistake to fix," I replied, feeling years of frustration bubbling up. When I quit that toxic marketing job, you all acted like I'd committed career mistake. None of you asked what I wanted to do next. You just started sending me job listings for positions like the one I'd just escaped. Several uncomfortable glances were exchanged around the room. We were trying to help, Mom said softly. I know, I acknowledged. But sometimes help feels like control when it doesn't consider what the other person actually needs. Dad cleared his throat. So all those times we thought you were struggling, I was building something. Those first 6 months were brutal, 16-hour days, living on ramen, learning everything from scratch. But by the time last Christmas rolled around, we'd already hit 7 figures in annual revenue. Last Christmas? Mom's eyes widened. When you couldn't afford to fly home? I was in Copenhagen, meeting with European distributors, I admitted. I took a red-eye back on the 26th to make it for the leftovers dinner. The memory of that trip, sleeping in the airport, working on my laptop through Christmas Day while the family assumed I was too broke to travel, suddenly seemed less like a noble sacrifice and more like unnecessary deception. Jessica handed my phone back, her expression tight. So, the struggling artist act was just that, an act. Not an act, I corrected. A simplification. It was easier than explaining that I was building something you might not understand or value. That's not fair, she countered. You never gave us the chance. She had a point. I'd assumed their reactions based on past experiences without allowing for the possibility of growth or understanding. You're right, I conceded. That's on me. The Target deal. Mark spoke up for the first time. That's huge. How did you manage that as a small business? And just like that, the conversation shifted. The initial shock and hurt gave way to genuine curiosity. Mark asked about supply chain logistics. Dad inquired about my business structure. Michelle wanted to know about our marketing strategy. Even Uncle Phil eventually found questions to ask, his initial disbelief transforming into reluctant respect when I explained how we'd scaled from my apartment kitchen to a 20,000 square foot warehouse in under 2 years. Why tell us now? Mom asked during a lull in the questions. After keeping it secret for so long, I looked down at my still unemployed shirt, now feeling less like armor and more like an outdated disguise. Because I'm proud of what I've built, I said simply. And because I'm tired of pretending to be someone I'm not in the one place I should be able to be myself, with family. The room fell silent again, but this time, the quality of the silence had changed. The remainder of the evening took on a surreal quality. The family gathering that had started with the usual dynamics, me as the underachiever, them as the successful ones, had transformed into something entirely different. Suddenly, I was fielding business questions between bites of Christmas cookies, explaining profit margins to Uncle Phil and digital marketing strategies to Jessica. I still can't believe you kept this from us for 3 years, Mom said as she refilled my wine glass. There was a mixture of pride and lingering hurt in her eyes. All those times we worried. I'm sorry for the worry, I said sincerely. But I'm not sorry for building it my way. She nodded slowly. I understand that now. But promise me something? What's that? No more secrets like this. Success or failure, we're your family. I clinked my glass against hers. Deal. Across the room, Uncle Phil was engaged in animated conversation with Tyler, who was filling in the gaps of my business story with the parts he'd witnessed. For once, Uncle Phil was listening more than talking. So you're telling me, I overheard him say to Tyler, that the Instagram marketing strategy was all in-house? No agency? Completely organic growth, Tyler confirmed. They've turned down 3 acquisition offers in the past year alone. Uncle Phil whistled, shooting a glance my way that contained something I'd never seen directed at me before. Respect. Dad approached next, settling into the chair beside me with a glass of his special reserve scotch, the one he only brought out for significant occasions. I owe you an apology, he said quietly. For what? For not seeing what was right in front of me. For assuming your path had to look like mine, or your sister's to be valid. He took a sip of scotch. I was wrong. You weren't entirely wrong, I admitted. I was floundering for a while. Those first few jobs after college really were disasters. Maybe, he conceded, but building something from nothing, that takes vision. And courage. He raised his glass. I'm proud of you. Not because you've built a successful business, but because you had the conviction to follow your own path. His words penetrated deeper than I'd expected. All these years, I'd assumed his disappointment was about my lack of conventional success. Perhaps it had been more about my apparent lack of direction, something that, ironically, I'd had in abundance, just not visibly. Thanks, Dad, I said, my voice unexpectedly thick with emotion. As the night progressed, I found myself in the unusual position of being the center of positive attention. Jessica wanted to know about our intellectual property protection. Mark asked about our supply chain sustainability practices. Michelle inquired about our hiring process, suddenly interested in exploring options outside corporate America. Even Aunt Karen approached, somewhat subdued. I had no idea, she said, sitting beside me. All this time, when I was sending you those job listings. I appreciated the thought. I offered, deciding to be generous. No, you didn't, she replied with unexpected self-awareness. And you shouldn't have. I was being condescending. She hesitated. Your candles got me through my knee surgery recovery last year. The lavender one. I had no idea they were yours. It was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever heard from Aunt Karen. As midnight approached, I found myself ready to leave, not out of discomfort as in previous years, but because tomorrow would be another early start. The Australian launch wouldn't manage itself. You're leaving already? Mom asked as I gathered my coat. But we've barely had time to talk about your business. We'll have plenty of time, I promised. Maybe you and Dad can visit the warehouse next month? See the operation in person? Her face lit up. We'd love that. The goodbyes were different this year. Handshakes became hugs. Pitying looks had transformed into expressions of interest and admiration. Uncle Phil even pressed a business card into my hand. Not for a job, he clarified quickly. My investment guy. When you're ready to diversify some of those profits. I'll call him, I promised, surprising myself by meaning it. As I hugged Mom goodbye at the door, she held on a moment longer than usual. Next year, she said, no more unemployed shirt. I laughed. I was thinking of wearing one that says CEO instead. Perfect, she beamed. Driving away from the house, I felt lighter than I had in years. The weight of pretense, of diminishing myself to fit their expectations, had lifted. For the first time, the Henderson family had seen me, really seen me, and instead of trying to change me, they'd adjusted their perception. When I arrived home, I carefully removed the still unemployed shirt. Instead of tossing it in the laundry, I folded it neatly and placed it in my desk drawer. Not to wear again, but to keep, a reminder of where I'd been and how far I'd come. The next morning, I called my marketing team. Change of plans for the family gift packages, I instructed. I want each product customized. Jessica gets the lawyer-themed candle set. Uncle Phil gets the luxury car air fresheners. Mom and Dad get the proud parents gift basket. And the gift cards? My assistant asked. I thought about it for a moment. Standard amounts, but with a special note. From your formerly unemployed family member. Merry Christmas. As I hung up, I smiled at the thought of next year's Christmas party. No more hiding, no more pretending. Just me, success, failures, and all, finally taking my authentic place at the Henderson family table. And if anyone had a problem with that, well, I'd just send them a candle.